Hello, this is Zara Imtiaz from Asian Agribiz. Today we have our Malaysian regional correspondent Rajeshwari Ramani who spoke to Rabobank Singapore's Senior Analyst Animal Protein Research for Southeast Asia, Mr. Ben Santoso, on how brand development is crucial for animal protein sector players now more than ever. We see that while sustainability and the reeling impacts of COVID-19 are factors, other issues such as the increasing emergence of omnichannel businesses also deem branding critical in the future.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for agreeing for this interview today. Let's get a start on our first question. Why is brand development becoming so important for traditional meat production, especially in a post pandemic world, with reference to both COVID 19 and African swine fever?
It's very important when we talk about brands. The connotation is typically consumer loyalty and high margins. But meat products are in fact as commoditized as it can be, and it's also perishable. When we look at the different animal protein products out there, I mean, sure, there's a price difference between, let's say, Wagyu beef or the leaner buffalo meat or the free range eggs versus the conventional eggs. But these price differentiations is commensurate with cost. So when it comes to asking for higher margins, I think there needs to be a significant product differentiation. So I think branding can take form in more processed products, longer shelf life products, or any other value added products like, I don't know, liquid eggs or powdered eggs and et cetera. So over the past decades or so, I think there is also an increasing trend for consumers to pick, quote unquote, better for you products like, low sugar, low cholesterol, less fat, etc. So maybe after COVID, it would be products that would increase your immunity or products that come from trusted brands. So I think brands do make a difference. Why I think brand development for meat producers is very important is because when we look at the meat producers' margins, we see two sets of issue. The first is that there's a higher degree of volatility compared to CPG companies like Unilever or Nestle or Mars, because raw meat products are essentially a commodity and it comes with its own cyclicality. And the second issue is that there is an accelerating trend towards vertical integration for those standalone players in the industry as well. For example, the compound feed producers are now starting to produce their own feed additives, and some of them actually move down to establish their own farms. Or previously, the standalone farms are now building their own slaughterhouses and cold chain logistics. And at the same time, we're also seeing consolidation in smaller farms, not only because of COVID, but also because of African swine fever or ASF. So I think in the long run, meat producers can no longer rely on the stability of selling feed to the smaller farmers because the space is not only getting smaller, but it's also getting crowded. To answer your question, for meat producers, having high margin products is actually very important for their long-term positioning. So that's more or less what we think why it's important.
Some market research and even analysts in recent webinars say the current time is the best time to embark on brand development activities. Do you think this will be the case?
This is a question about timing. So I think it's always a good time to build brands, but we view the COVID impact slightly differently. What COVID has done is to shift the channels where meat is purchased or consumed. So that's a shift from, let's say, food service to retail, from shop retail to online, from dine-in to delivery. and in the case of ASF, from wet markets to modern trade. But in the overall scheme of things, these shifts don't really move the needle much. For example, the deliveries in QSR in Indonesia before the pandemic probably accounts for about 10% of sales. Now it accounts for about 20%. So it's doubled,
Yeah.
but it's still less than half.
Okay.
So that's food service. For online grocery shopping, the
Mm-hmm.
percentage is even smaller. So at
Mm-hmm.
least what we see in Southeast Asia, meat is still mostly retailed or consumed, um, purchased fresh. So obviously, the next question is whether or not these shifts are temporary or accelerating. And the quick answer is that it will accelerate. So we look at this in two different stages. So the first stage is what we call a short-term consolidation, maybe over the next 1 to 2 years. And the second stage is what we call the new norm. And so in the first stage, meat producers will probably focus on strengthening their downstream integration. So this includes more slaughtering or more processing capacities and capabilities. And at the same time, there will be also more investment in digitalization, including online presence. Believe it or not, some of them are not present online. So at this stage, I think the focus will be on product development that will be for the mass market. So hygiene, the different types of cuts, and food safety, of course, will become the standard because the focus here will be on price and value for money because I think the economic recovery is probably going to be gradual. So that's the first stage. The
Mm-hmm.
second stage, we will see more product differentiation
Mm-hmm.
or value add, online sales, and more competition. So, I mean, don't forget that we're also seeing supermarket private labels coming up to challenge the brands that already exist today. Also, in the second stage, by this time, the assumption is that food service would have already recovered to the pre-COVID level. So I think there will be an opportunity to build these capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a tie-up with cloud kitchens or setting up one's own ready meals that can complement food service and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So there are a lot of opportunities going forward. Obviously, the end game is of course to go to the consumers directly without the middleman. This is an important aspect
Mm-hmm.
because in a digital world, it's actually easier to compare prices. I think at the end of the day, producers will eventually be forced to reduce cost through
Mm-hmm.
scale and integration. So that is part of building brands.
Will brand development convince consumer perception to view traditionally but responsibly grown meat positively?
I think it really depends on what's on offer. I think when it comes to brand development, it's more about the differentiation and what's the additional value to the
Mm-hmm.
consumers. In the post-COVID world, I think transparency and food safety is
Mm-hmm.
very important. And so is animal welfare or sustainability and CSR. So those things are actually has come to the fore as well. But this will increasingly become the norm over the long run and not the exception because everybody in the industry needs to embrace this anyway. Because at some point, it will become a tool of competition. If you do it and I don't, then I will lose out. I think meat producers really need to watch their back as well. But going back to your question about consumer perception, I think consumers really go for taste,
Mm-hmm.
for value, for money, as well
Mm-hmm.
as convenience. I don't think those qualities will change.
How far will brand development go to be transparent in the animal protein sector?
Yeah, I think some companies are quite transparent, communicating these concerns
Mm-hmm.
and how they go about in addressing issues. In animal welfare, for example, more investments are actually being made. For
Mm-hmm.
example, in the egg production, the bigger cages or even cage free are
Yeah.
the standard for new large scale farms. In broilers, the regulators have also moved to ban AGP to address the antibiotics resistance in humans, and companies are complying with that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of swine farms, I think capturing methane from the manure that's produced to generate electricity is also already part of the blueprint for large scale farming. But for every change that the consumers demand, there will always be a consequence, be that significant capital outlay to build new farm or
Yes.
increased mortality rate as a
Yeah.
result of the AGP. I think change will not happen overnight, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they need to deal with these consequences. So, in terms of the product development itself, I don't think producers will have any problem in promoting their credentials
Mm-hmm.
both in the media or in differentiating their products. Again, this doesn't mean that this is what the brand is all about
Yep.
because it will increasingly become the norm. To answer your question, how far? Very
Yeah.
far because they have a lot to show.
What are some of the mode, channels, players in the industry use to reach specific markets?
Yeah, I think when we look at a post COVID world, there is probably going to be less work from office and more remote working. And also, there is probably less food on the go. And online sales and food delivery will definitely be a big part of this. And what we're seeing so far is actually increased penetration through convenience stores as distribution points. Well, with more people staying at home, then obviously they want to have more convenience nearby. So I
Yep.
think this will continue. And also, wet market is probably going to maintain their share over
Mm-hmm.
the next 1 to 2 years in what we call that first stage, as long as they're able to offer better prices. Otherwise, it will probably shift towards modern trade or online. So that's what I see will happen, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in a post COVID world.
What are some of the animal protein brand development in the market which currently works?
Yeah, I think there's several examples, Rush.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Southeast Asia, we're seeing several developments. In fact, in Vietnam, for example, Masan is building its meat deli brand, which is distributed in the modern trade, and it seems to be doing very well. Of course, as you mentioned, CP as well as Bettergrow is already far ahead in this segment.
Yeah.
And CP is even entrenched in food service with several brands
Mm-hmm.
in some countries. Also in Malaysia, I don't know if you've heard that, we're also seeing Leonghap branching out into food service with the acquisitions of Baker's Cottage.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
that
they are.
one actually is also another trend that we're seeing. And in Indonesia, we're seeing a move beyond frozen chicken nuggets into ready meals,
Mm-hmm.
and we're also seeing more direct sales through their own convenience stores, like Prima Fresh Mart by CP or
Mm-hmm.
Best Meat by Jaffa. I think the trend certainly is going that way. But I think it's also important for me to stress
Mm-hmm.
here that building brands has a completely different dynamics from farming. It requires, constant innovation,
Mm-hmm.
servicing, and marketing or consumer education, if you may call it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the capital outlay for these assets and the brand building effort itself is actually not small.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this situation, obviously the choice is either they invest now or
Yeah.
they risk being left behind because more and more producers are actually moving in the same direction. So this will eventually determine how successful some companies are versus
Yep.
others.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that insightful information, Ben.
Yep, it's always a pleasure, Rush. Thank you for having us in this segment.
We hope you found the information useful on how further you can improve your own profitability. You can find similar insightful podcasts on our website, which may be of use to you. This is Zara signing off for Asian Agribiz, and do visit our website www.asian-agribiz.com for more topics in the future. Thank you.